Hello and welcome to the Texas Financial Derivatives YouTube channel. I'm Austin. I'm one of the several content creators for the channel. And today we are going to be talking about a form of financial derivative. It's called an option. And we'll write that out. And we're going to be giving some sort of introductory definitional kind of ideas about the terms and the different things that you'll need to associate with options as you move through the videos on here or through our Analyst course in the club. So an option is a contract that gives the buyer the right but not the obligation to exchange. So they can if they want to, but they don't have to. An asset P for an asset Q. And those assets can be 2 shares of stock. They can be 2 different currencies like dollars and euros. They can be currency and stock. They can be just about anything you want them to be. So we're exchanging an asset P for an asset Q at a time determined by the contract. So this is kind of, a textbook definition of an option. It gives you the right but not the obligation. You can if you want to, but you don't have to exchange some general asset P for another general asset Q at some time in the future, determined by the contract. Generally, that time is called the expiration date. So we'll write that as, call that expiration date, or expiry is the other term that's typically used. That's just the last possible day that the contract can happen. There's 2 different kinds of options. There's American options and European options. American options can be used anytime on or before expiry. European options used on expiry only. And those are the 2 kinds of options we'll generally be dealing with in this class. There's other extensions of that called Bermudan options, which have special times that you can exercise them. And to exercise it just means what these definitions here and here say. You use them. This means exercise the option. So exercised and used just mean the same thing. So the American options can be exercised anytime on or before the expiration date. The European options can be exercised on the expiration date only. And then there's some other kinds of options that we won't get into that are Bermudan options that can be exercised only on special dates. But the idea here is that you have the option to exchange P for Q at the expiry date. And so we'll define T to be the expiry date. Right? And so let's draw a time diagram of what's happening here. We'll define T to be the expiry date, and we'll define, you do have to pay for the right to use the option, to have the option. So we'll say this is the cost initially, and this is just a little bit of a notation that means defined. And so it is defined to be cost initially. So we have time 0, that's today. Time T, that's expiry. So at time 0, we give up the initial cost. We pay the initial cost. It comes out of our pocket. And then at time T, we get payoff. So let's assume first, let's say that Q is more valuable than P. Then we'd certainly like to exercise the option. We'd like to get Q and give up P. So we've paid for the right to have this option, and what happens at expiry is we go up to the person that has given us this option, and we say, look, we have this option that says that I can give you this less valuable asset for this more valuable asset. Because this asset is less valuable than that asset, I would like to exercise this option. And for the American options, that can happen, anytime in here. For European options, that only happens here. And so when the asset Q is greater than the asset P, so we say, should we exercise? That's the first thing, is should we exercise? And if Q is greater than P, the value of Q is greater than P, then exercise. And if Q is less than or equal to P, then don't exercise. What happens if we don't exercise? Well, then the contract just goes away. And we don't get any payoff, and the person that sold it to us gets this initial cost, and good for them, right? But if Q is less than or equal to P, then there's no point in exercising and paying more money for no reason, or giving something up that's valuable for no reason. So we just won't exercise, and we'll just take the loss. But when, in the case that asset Q is greater than P, then we will exercise. Then we'll exercise the option. We'll get our profit, or get our payoff, rather, our payoff. And so that's the idea, is that our payoff is defined as kind of the same piecewise function. And that is when Q is greater than P, we have a payoff of Q minus P. And then when Q is less than or equal to P, we have a payoff of 0, because we won't exercise. We won't do anything. So our payoff is what? So then this kind of intuitively explains payoff as, we'll define it here in English, is that the payoff is the amount we receive. I don't think I spelled receive right there. At expiry. And that's all it is it's either going to be 0 in the case that we're less than or equal to, that the asset that we're getting is less than or equal to the asset that we're giving up, and it's going to be the difference in the two when the asset that we're receiving is greater than the asset we're giving up. Then we'd certainly like to exercise and get a positive payoff. Otherwise, well, we don't want to exercise at all, because that's either going to result in no gain in the case that the two are equal, or it's going to result in a negative gain in the case that what we're giving up is more valuable than what we're getting, right? So we just won't exercise. So now we have this kind of messy notation here, that's this kind of piecewise notation. We can shrink that down into one function, and we'll call it a payoff at time t, or at time, t. And we'll define it as the maximum of Q at time t minus P at time t and 0. So as a function of time, this is gonna equal the difference in what we're getting and what we're giving up when what we're getting is greater than what we're giving up when we do exercise, and it's going to equal 0 otherwise. It's going to equal 0 when Q, the value of Q at time t is equal to the value of P at time t, or when the value of P at time t is greater than Q at time t, in which case this would be a negative amount. The maximum function says, well, 0 is greater than the negative amount, so it's going to return 0. And in the case where they're equal, that is Q sub t equals, or the value of Q at time t equals the value of P at time t, then this expression on the left of our parentheses is 0, and the expression on the right of the parentheses is always 0. So it'll pick the maximum of 0 and 0, which is 0. Or when the value of Q at time t is greater than the value of P at time t, then we have a positive amount on the left-hand side of our parentheses here, and we have 0 on the right-hand side. So it's going to pick the maximum of those two, which is going to be the positive amount. So it'll either be 0 or it'll be a positive amount, the payoff will be. But our profit can be negative. And the profit is defined as the payoff, what we get at the end, minus the initial cost, and the initial cost, which remember, back up here we just defined to be V sub 0, V0. The initial cost can be defined in two ways: in terms of an accounting profit, which just takes the raw dollar amount, in which case the accounting profit would be defined to be the payoff minus V0, or an economic profit. The economic profit is defined to be the payoff minus the accumulated value or future value of the initial cost. And so this is what we could have gotten had we invested it somewhere else. Generally, that somewhere else will be in a government-issued bond. It'll be using the risk-free interest rate, and that's what we could have gotten had we invested that cost somewhere else. Will be the future value or accumulated value of the initial cost. So our economic profit, which is what we're going to usually be talking about economic profit, and that's just going to be our payoff minus the accumulated value of the initial cost. Now, that's going to about cover it as far as our payoff and our profit go, except in the case of our P and Q option above, right? Let's define the payoff. We've defined the payoff function, that it's the max of the value of Q at time t minus the value of P at time t, and 0. Let's write out the profit function quickly here. So profit at time t is equal to max of the value of Q at time t minus the value of P at time t, and 0, minus and so that's the ending parentheses there. So this minus is outside the parentheses, minus the future value of the initial cost of this option. So that's going to be the amount of money that we're going to be able to actually make. That's going to be, our profit is going to be bounded below by the idea that we're going to lose the accumulated value of what we could have had we invested that initial cost into a government bond. And it's going to be bounded above by, theoretically, if the value of the asset Q at time t is $1 million, and the value of the asset P is at time t is $50, then we could just keep going up and up and up, and we could have kind of an unbounded profit, as long as the value of Q at time t is greater than the value of P at time t, and then this over here would be finite. So theoretically, we'd have an unbounded upper limit on our profit, but we're bounded from below. The lowest that this on the left hand side of the minus sign here, the lowest value this can be is 0, and then this is always just going to be a constant on the future value of the initial cost. So we're bounded from below on just losing that initial amount. And so that's why options are so attractive to college students, is that you can invest, and the worst that you can ever do is you can lose the initial amount that you invested in, right? Now, we can start to talk about long and short, being long and short in something. And so our option here on Q and P, we can define long and short using that. So we can say long in some asset, we'll just say asset, means that the position being long in some asset means that the position gains value when the asset gains value. So our example above is long in Q, right? Because as Q increases, our example option, our example that we're using up above, our example option, that option's value increases as well. So our option above is long in Q. So we say we are long in Q if we purchase the option above. So then short in the same asset means and this is again referring to a position. And a position just means your current holdings. So if we hold an option, then our position would be that option. And so everything's relative to what your current holdings are as far as position goes. So the position of the position that we're talking about here gains value when the asset loses value. So it's kind of the opposite of what we said above. So we are short in. We say we are short in Q in P. Sorry, excuse me. So as P decreases in value, our example option increases in value. And so long as Q is less than P, it doesn't increase in value at all. But once P decreases in value below Q and continues to decrease, our option will increase. And so that's just the idea that our driver of our payoff is the value of Q at time t minus the value of P at time t. So the two ways that you can get this to increase is to increase Q or to decrease P. We'll make this quantity here increase. So that means that we are long in Q and we are short in P. And so that's the idea of long and short. And we'll see that here with calls and puts. So a call option is the right to buy, and the asset is typically denoted S, the value of S at time t. Right to buy S at time t for the strike, and we'll explain that word in a moment, at expiry. So the strike is a dollar amount specified by the call or put or any other option for that matter that uses a strike price, and it's generally denoted K, and it's just dollars, right? It's just in dollars. And we're exchanging K dollars for a unit of stock, and generally, it's priced in multiple units. I think it's 100 units, right? But the idea of the payoff, the idea here is the payoff at time t is that we get S's value at time t, and we give up K. And so in practice, and of course this is the max function still, right? So it's the maximum of the difference and 0 for the same reasons that it's the maximum of Q minus P and 0 above. So generally, these are settled with cash settlements, and so the cash settlement is just in the form of the difference in the cash value of the stock at time t and K. So this will almost always result in when you have a positive payoff, will result in you getting cash. You're not generally, I mean, you can get stock, but generally it's going to be a cash settlement. We're going to assume that it's always just going to be a cash settlement in the form of the value of the stock at time t and less the value of k. So our payoff is the maximum of the stock value at time t minus k and a 0. So if we don't exercise it, we get nothing. If we exercise it, we will exercise it when the stock value is greater than k, and we just won't exercise it otherwise. So we can draw what's called the payoff diagram of a call. And so that's going to be the payoff on the y-axis as a function of the stock price at time t on the x-axis. So some good points to mark off here would be the maximum payoff happens when the stock price is at infinity. So we have kind of an unbounded maximum payoff, right? The minimum payoff is going to be when the stock price is below the strike, in which case it'll be 0. So here's K, right? So this is the stock price, or I'm sorry, the strike price. And so that's going to be K on our graph, and we'll use green here. So when the stock price is small, so this is 0, and this is, the value is going to increase along this axis. The value is small, we're going to start at 0, and we're not making any money yet because we're going to assume K is greater than 0, some value greater than 0, doesn't matter what it is. Once the stock price at time t is equal to the strike price, we're going to start increasing. Our payoff is going to start increasing. And it's going to keep increasing on and on and on and on as the stock price gets larger. As the stock price gets larger, the difference in the stock price and the strike price gets larger, and so our payoff gets larger. So it may be obvious, those of you with eagle eyes may have noticed that this option is long in the stock, because as the stock price goes up and up and up, our payoff goes up and up and up. And so we're just going to keep making money the further along we go in price with reference to the stock. Now, our profit diagram, we can draw the profit diagram of a call. And so in this case, our axes are going to be profit over here and S sub t over here. So it's the stock price at time t. Going to start out at 0, and we're going to have, well, actually, I need to dip into the negative axis here, don't I? Because we can have a negative profit. There we go. So this is plotting the function that is the maximum of S sub t minus k and 0. And we're going to subtract from that some constant that's the future value of the initial cost. And so that's our economic profit, right? And so that's what we're graphing here, really. It's the profit diagram of a call, but that's the function that we're graphing here, really. And so when we're at our worst, when we don't exercise, let's mark that off in red over here because it's a bad number. We're gonna lose the future value of the initial cost down there. And then until the option hits our strike price, K, we aren't going to start increasing. And maybe I need to back that up a little bit. Let's put K back here. Until we hit K, we're not going to start increasing. And then once we hit this point, which is going to be once the stock price is equal to the strike plus this future value of the initial cost, we're gonna cross back over into having a positive profit. So again, we're gonna start out in green. We're gonna start out down here because the worst we can do when the stock is worthless. K is greater than 0, and so we're just gonna lose the future value of our initial cost. And so it's still 0 until we hit K, until we hit the strike. Now we're going to start increasing up until we hit the value of the strike plus the future value of the cost. And now we've got a positive profit. And we're going to keep going up. And so that's the profit diagram. And if you notice, the profit diagram is what? It's just the payoff diagram shifted down here. So it's just a downward shift of that same line. It's that same line. It's shifted down by the future value of the initial cost, shifted down by a constant, right? So then the other kind of option that's going to be typically discussed in Texas financial derivatives and in this series of videos is a put option. And that gives the buyer the right to sell the stock ST at the strike at expiry. So in this case, when we have a positive payoff, we're going to be looking at the quantity. We get the strike K. We give up the stock S, the value of the stock ST. So this is the value of our cash settlement. And so we're going to be looking at the maximum of that guy and 0, of that difference and 0. And so that's our payoff for our call. Or for our put. That's our payoff of our put. And then, of course, the profit is the maximum of the strike minus the stock at time T, our cash settlement, and 0, minus the future value of the initial cost, V sub 0, V value at time 0, and that's our profit. And so that's the idea that we get some cash, we give up the stock. We don't actually have to have the stock on hand, though, remember, because we're doing this cash settlement thing. So we're just exchanging cash here. So they would really just be paying us the difference in the cash value of the strike and the cash value of the stock. And so that's all we're really dealing with. But in theory, if you owned a stock, you may want to buy a put, not only to offset your position being long in the stock, right? Because if you're holding a stock, then you're naturally long in the stock because your position increases in value with the stock's increase in value. So maybe to offset that position as a hedge, you'd want to buy a put to protect from a decrease in value, to be able to sell off your stock at time T for at least this strike. And so that's like the worst you could do is that at time T you could sell it off at the strike price. So maybe that's why you would also want to buy a put, is if you actually own the stock and you wanted to protect from a price decrease. So these almost act like insurance. And insurance is actually a form of an option as well. If you buy life insurance and stuff like that, it's actually kind of an option yourself. You're just betting on a different asset in that case, or health insurance, right? You're betting on a different asset, on your body dying or getting sick, right? And so and a lot of things, studying options is actually going to kind of open your mind to being able to see these different financial transactions under the lens of options, which is a really interesting thing. But for now, we're going to talk about the payoff and profit diagrams for a put. So let's look at the payoff diagram for a put. And again, we're just graphing this payoff function up here. Here's our axes. We've got the stock price at time T and the payoff. And so what's the worst we can do? The worst we can do is 0, is not making any money at all. And what's the best we can do? The best we can do is if the stock's worthless. The stock's never going to be a negative value. That's the first thing. And so we're going from 0. The stock price is never going to be negative. If it hits 0 even, then the company's equity collapses completely, which is a bad thing for them, right? But a good thing for us if we own a put, right? So here's the strike price K, and we're going to be at our best when the stock price is 0, right? And then when the stock price is K, that's when we're going to hit zero world, so to speak. So maybe down here it's K. And let's graph this in green. So we're going to start to decrease. Whoops. We're going to start to decrease until we hit K, right? So our payoff starts out at K and decreases to 0 as the stock price increases. Once it hits 0, that is, once the stock price at time t is equal to the strike price, it's going to continue to be 0 forever. After that, no matter what the price of the stock is, it's going to just always be 0, and it's going to keep being 0 for forever, as long as the stock keeps increasing in value. So maybe those of you with eagle eyes, again, realized that the put is a short position in the stock. And that's because you do better the worse the stock is doing. See here, as we decrease, as we move backwards along the x-axis here, along the stock price at time t axis here, as we continue to move backwards, our value continues to increase. So with a backwards movement in price or a downwards movement in price, our payoff increases, right? So now we'd like to ask, what does the profit diagram for a put look like? And so now we're going to need, again, that negative axis. That's not a very good axis. That's better. And so here's the stock price at time t. Here's our profit. And we're really graphing, again, we're graphing the maximum of K minus stock price at time t and 0 minus the future value, this constant, of the initial cost. So again, what's the worst we could do? Well, when the stock price is at a maximum, then we just lose the future value of our initial cost, right? So we're going to end up doing the best that we can is going to be when the stock price is 0, and that's going to happen here. And the best that we can do is going to be up here. It's going to be the strike price minus the future value of the initial cost. That's going to be the best we can do. And we're going to decrease from there until this part of our function is 0. And so we're going to decrease from there until we get to just the negative, until we get to down here to the negative future value of our initial cost, right? And so that's going to be this point down here is going to be the future value of our initial cost. Is here till we cross over into the negative axis, and we're going to cross over to the negative axis exactly when the strike price is equal to the stock price minus, or the stock price plus the future value of the initial cost, and that's when the profit is equal to 0, right? That's this point here. And so we're going to cross over when, or maybe it's better to show it as what the stock price would be. So that's going to be the stock price is going to be equal to the strike price minus the future value of the initial cost. That's right. And so you do a little bit of algebra on this guy when it's equal to 0, on this function equation when it's equal to 0. And that's what you'll get, is that the stock price at time t has to be equal to the strike price minus the future value of the initial cost for our profit to be 0. That's for this point right here. And it's a little counterintuitive to think about puts as opposed to calls. Thinking about calls is a little bit easier to visualize in your head what's happening, because it's a little bit easier, at least for me, in my opinion, to think about a position increasing with respect to the value of the stock than it is to think about the position decreasing with respect to the value of the stock. But either which way, at this point, we've hit the lowest possible amount that we can have be our profit at this point here. So we're just going to continue with that lowest possible amount as long as the stock price increases and keeps increasing. That's the worst we can possibly do is for that maximum function to be 0. And so the worst we can do is to just lose the future value of our initial investment, right? So that's the profit diagram of a put is going to be that you're going to have this decreasing function that's going to level off eventually in terms of the stock price increasing. And so those are calls and puts. That's the payoff and profit for a call and a put. And that's going to kind of wrap it up for our options basics. When we come back next time, we'll discuss strategies. We'll discuss what to do when we think the price is going to go up or down, or things that you could do if you think the price is going to go up or down, or if you think the price is going to move all around. So we'll see you back next time. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and thanks for watching. Take care.